Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the live analysis of EOM Z3. We begin with QA section today. So this is the usual flow in which we'll be taking up the QA/DI section analysis, which starts with topic distribution, followed by question mapping into easy, moderate, and difficult levels. We then discuss expected attempts and scores, and finally, percentile versus score equivalence. So let's begin. This was the topic distribution of QADI section in ZAT3. So there were 3 questions of surds and indices and time and work each, 2 questions each from linear equation, time and distance, triangles, and 1 questions from the rest of the chapters, which is percentage, profit loss, ratio proportion, SICI, allocation. So each of these arithmetic based topics finding at least 1 questions, including advanced arithmetic like permutation combination having 1 question. Function has a presence with 1 question and 1 question from chords and polygons. There were 2 sets of data interpretation, each having 3 questions. One was based on mixed graph, wherein a donut chart as well as a line chart was given. And the other one was a caselet, which was based on time zone difference. So let's begin the question mapping part. This is how the question mapping of easy question looked like. There was the first question, which was based on successive percentage increase. So this was a standard manufacturer, retailer, wholesaler kind of a question where everybody charges their percentage profit and the customer is paying 4500. If the customer buys directly from the manufacturer, how much amount can he save? That was the question. So it's a standard percentage increase based question, and everybody could have solved this question, in my opinion. Another one was an SICI based question where this was again a question based on percentage increase. So it was given that an amount invested at simple interest becomes 7 times in 7 years. So this is what you have to catch. 7 years, there is a 600 percentage increase. Okay. And in 7 years, if there is a 600 percentage increase, then in 21 years, the increase has to be 3 times. So it's 1800 percentage increase, and therefore 19 times. Okay, so you could have solved this question mentally. Another one was question based on time and work, which applied unitary method based approach. So there were men and mops which were used to clean the floors. The question says that 10 men can clean 10 rooms using 10 mop sticks. Okay, so in how many days 12 men can complete a cleaning of 24 floors? That was the question. So here you could have tried making an equation on the lines of men multiplied by time is equal to work. You can make two equation, take their ratio, you get the number of days. A question based on allocation was given where initial concentration of milk was 96% in 500 liter solution. And if this concentration of milk needs to be brought down to 75%, what amount of water was to be added? That was the question. And yes, you had to find out the time required for addition of that water, given that water is being added at the rate of 0.5 liter every minute. A question based on time and distance where a standard approach of t is equal to root ab was given. So by now you should be knowing that whenever two people start from different point and they meet somewhere in between, and after crossing each other, if they are taking a given time, let's say a and b hours to reach their respective destination, then the time required for both of them to meet is the geometric mean of a and b. So that was the concept that was used here. Coming to question mapping of moderate questions, there was a question based on profit and loss. So that said that a person, when he sells at 40% loss, okay, so you can always assume the values over here, which helps you make 40% loss. Something like 100 can be the selling price because the loss is made on SP. Okay, so 100 can be the selling price and cost price will be 140 rupees. So this will enable you to have a 40% loss on SP. And once you start assuming these values, you will be able to find out a new SP, which will help you make 40% profit. A question based on dependent equation was given. So here we had to find out the total cost of certain number of apples, mangoes, and bananas. And again, by now you should be familiar with such kind of question that we have to multiply the first equation with K1, second with K2, and get the required value of K1 and K2. A question based on surds in indices was given where 5 terms were to be compared, each term having the difference in the values, which was 2. Okay, so there was something like under root of 101 minus under root of 99. Another was under root of 45 minus under root of 43. And there were 5 such terms given. We had to find out which one was the highest. Okay, so even by trial and error, you will be able to figure out that if you take root 3 minus root 1 and root 4 minus root 2, both of them having a difference of 2, you can figure out which one is higher. And on the same lines, you can develop some thinking. A question based on time and work was given where A and B were increasing their frequency, their efficiency individually. So it was given that if A increase his efficiency by 25%, the work gets done 5% sooner. So the time reduces by 5%. This will enable you to make equation. And once you make the equation, get the values of A and B, you will be able to find out the time required if B is increasing his efficiency by 40%. A question based on time and distance where circular race was given where 2 people were changing the direction as well as the speed. Both the things are being changed. One is change of direction, second is change of speed after they meet each other. Okay, so here by the time they complete 2 meeting cycle, both would have covered equal distance. Okay, so that is the concept you can use over here. A question based on surds and indices was given where the given expression was equal to 1. So we have to consider 2 cases here, right? How do we get to 1 as a simplification of the given expression? So there are 2 cases mainly. One is 1 raised to anything is 1. Okay. Second is anything raised to 0 is also 1. So we can make 2 cases and get the values of x appropriately. Another question, once again based on surds and indices, wherein this particular expression was equal to 192. Not only we have to solve for x over here, which was 7, but once we solve for x, we had to find out the number of digits in x raised to x. So ultimately, you had to find out the number of digits in 7 raised to 7. This involved a bit of approximation while calculating the final value. Question mapping of moderate but time-consuming questions. So there was a question based on a linear equation where the age problem was given and A, B, C were trying to relate their age with each other. Like A was saying to B that when I was equal to your age, you were 4/3 of my age. Some sort of relationship like that is given. So students might take some time to relate the age of A and B. Then again, you have to relate the age of B and C also. And finally, you have to find out the common ratio. So this was, according to me, a time-consuming question because you might require some time in making the initial assumptions. A question based on ratio proportion was given where a person was exchanging his coins. So he was exchanging all his 5 rupee coin with 2 rupees and 10 rupees coins. So the catch here was he was exchanging his coins for 2 and 10, right? So not all 5 rupee coin can be converted into 10. You need to have a minimum portion of 2 rupees coin. So that was the catch in this question. Next question, which was based on time and work, where a supply pipe was given and the supply pipe was used to fill 10 different tanks. And the condition given here in the question was each tank is able to utilize only 50% of the supply that is reaching it. And the remaining supply is passed on to the next tank. Okay, so we have to find out the third tank, the time required for the third tank to fill up. Okay, so if the supply line is providing you 512 liter per minute, the first tank can only use half of that, which is 256. And remaining 256 can be passed on to the next tanks. Now, second tank, when it is receiving 256, it can only utilize 128. So that was the concept. On these lines, you have to solve the question. A next question was based on permutation and combination. Well, this was not exactly an application of PNC, but it was more related to counting. So there are different types of dancers given: male, female, Indian, foreign, and some were solo, some were pair dancers, right? We have to find out the minimum number of foreign dancer, which can only be done with the help of some counting, right? The question might take some reading time because a lot of cases were involved. So it was a reading time of around 3 to 3.5 lines. And for each and every given statement, you have to make a chart uh, which enable you to find out the number of male and female dancers. So that, according to me, was slightly time consuming over here. Coming to question mapping of difficult questions, a question based on functions was given where a graph was given and we had to find out the graph of the inverse function to the given function. Okay, so the given function was log x function, and therefore the inverse function may be e raised to x or 10 raised to x, depending upon what was the base of log. And the graph of e raised to x or 10 raised to x would be your answer. Okay, a shortcut here, let me tell you, whenever you want to find out the graph of an inverse function, okay, just remember that it is symmetrical about the 45-degree line, that is x is equal to y line. Okay. A question based on triangles was given where a concept of X circle was used. Another question on quads and polygons where we had to find out, we had to relate area of a quadrilateral with the in radius of the circle inside the quadrilateral. And the next question, again based on geometry, which was involving a triangle, and there were 3 circles inscribed in the triangle at a different location. Okay, so all these 3 questions might sound slightly unfamiliar to the students. So do check out our text solution, video solution, just to understand these concepts in a proper detail. A question on mixed graph. Well, this was an easier one, a donut chart followed by a line graph. One could easily relate the data over here because the number of cricket players were given for each countries. So if you simply add up all these cricket players and equate that to 28%, which is visible on the adjacent graph, okay, you can calculate the total number of players, which was 100%. And once you crack the total number of players, you can answer the questions following it. So according to me, this set could take 6 to 7 minutes. You can solve all 3 questions. And the questions were easy to moderate kind of difficulty level. Another question which was based on case late. So there were departure time and arrival time given for different cities. Now, as soon as you check the arrival and departure time and the traveling time, you'll come to know that there is a difference of time zone involved in this question. Now, once you realize that there is a difference of time zone, there are only 2 cases and there are only 2 kind of people here. One who understand how to solve questions which are based on time zone difference, others who do not understand that. Okay, so it's a very simple call here. Yes, this was the concept. The question was based on time zone difference. If you are the one who do not know how to solve questions based on time zone difference, simply avoid this within first 1 to 2 minutes. And if you are the one who knows how to solve questions which are based on time zone difference, believe me, this is easy money on the table over here. So this is how it looks like with the overall summary of whatever analysis we have done from question to question. There were 6 questions which were falling into easy level. You should have taken all 6 of them. Moderate questions, there were 8 of them. We expect to solve a major chunk of the question here as well, which is somewhere around 7 questions, almost all of them. And from moderate and time consuming question, because there were lesser number of questions in this paper, which was 26, which is 2 less than the usual number of questions. We expect that you spend a few more minutes on solving this time consuming questions as well. So 3 out of 5 were gettable. And difficult questions, yes, if you know certain concepts related to triangle and the time zone difference, you could have solved 2 questions here. Okay, so out of 26 questions, 18 was the ideal attempt according to me. And based on these 18 attempts, if we map the accuracy to 80 to 85%, we can conclude that 15 questions correct can be a good number here. 3 incorrect, which helps us reach the net score as 13.75, which will be our 98th percentile. So this, yes, obviously, suggested time here again is around 50 minutes. So that doesn't have any sectional time limit, but we have to be disciplined in terms of the number of minutes that we spend on particular section. So my suggestion here is you spend around 45 to 50 minutes and get these many attempts. This is how the overall picture looks like. As discussed, 13.75 is our 98 percentile. You can get 99 percentile for a 1.25 marks more, which is 15 marks, and 99.5 for 17.5 marks. Most of the sectional cutoffs will be in the range of 90s and 80s. So if you look at those numbers for sectional cutoffs for XLRI and some other colleges, so they will be around 10.3, which is 90 percentile, and 80 percentile will be at 7 marks. Right. Now getting 10.3 is less than half of the total number of questions, I can say. Okay, total number of questions were at 26. Half of that is 13. 1/3 of that is 9. So you are getting anywhere between half to 1/3 of the total marks to get the sectional cutoff clear for XLRI BM course. That will be somewhere around 90 percentile. So this is it from my side for QA plus DI section analysis. I'll request Vijita madam to take over and discuss decision making as well as verbal section.
Thank you, sir. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a quick analysis of VALR as well as decision-making section. So let's understand what was the overall pattern again. 26 questions, and this is anyway indicated in the mock test that the mock demo test that XAT has uploaded, that the sectional is going to have 26 verbal sectional, the DM sectional is going to have 21, and the QA sectional is going to have 28 questions. So all of you, I hope you have downloaded your hall tickets. Okay, the hall ticket was uploaded a couple of days ago. I hope the hall tickets are downloaded. I hope all of you also take the time to go through this demo test so that you understand the XAT interface as well as the way in which the questions are given. Most of these questions are actually drawn from last year's paper. So XAT 2020 paper is what they have taken the questions from, but still do familiarize yourself with the interface of the exam. That's very important. So likewise, VA sectional had 26 questions, and we decided to stick to more or less the pattern that the demo has also indicated. 26 questions with 14 questions of RC. And when we talk of 14 questions of RC, we are also including that one poem which has 2 questions, right? So there were 4 RCs with 3 questions each, so much on the lines of last year, and 1 poem with 2 questions. Critical reasoning, instead of just 6 questions, this time there have been 7 questions of CR, because there was 1 question of logical continuation included, which is not, core critical reasoning, right? And FIJ, fact inference judgment too, which we have seen in XAT in various ways in the past years, right? 2 parajumbles, 2 sentence completion, and grammar came down to just 1 question because you had 1 more of CR. The entire paper sectional can be termed moderate to difficult because always, yes, the XAT verbal sectional can never be termed as easy to moderate. It is either, on the difficult side, moderately difficult, or a very difficult paper. So this one can be termed moderately difficult. Okay. Let's understand the various RCs and what we should have chosen. So the first RC, which was based on wealth and happiness, had abstract language. Though the number of words were very few, 380 words, not a lengthy passage, it would just take you a few minutes to read this passage. But then understanding it required care. You had to read. Language was simple, but the ideas are slightly abstract. So you had to read this with care. Surprisingly, the questions are not difficult. Moderate. The main idea question was moderate. The second question, inference, was moderate. The logical structure question which asked you about what is the method of reasoning employed in the question. That was the slightly difficult one. But something that you could attempt, you could get into this passage, in comparison to the other passages, this could be done. And you could probably spend about 10 minutes and 8 to 9 minutes, 8 to 10 minutes, and take this up and get these three questions too. RC2, literature, biographies, and biographers. Not very difficult to understand again. This passage is easier to read and it's a short one, 300 words only. But you'll find the two questions quite challenging. That assumption was a slightly challenging one. Even the main idea question has tricky options and therefore is difficult. The logical structure question is a moderate one. So if you compare these two RCs, the questions were slightly difficult here, but I'll still say RC1 and RC2 were doable. Both you could spend about a total of 18 minutes or so, 9 minutes per passage or 8 minutes per passage, 8 or 9, whatever, and get this right. Okay, so something you could choose here. Let's look at the next ones. So the poem is not actually a difficult one. Okay, so if you stayed away from the poem this time and you did not take it, then I think that's a loss, because it had fairly direct language. I think that first paragraph more or less expressed what the main theme is, which is anger against a friend, which has been expressed, and therefore the anger subsides. But his anger against an enemy is not expressed, and therefore it grows. Now you have a metaphor introduced there. You have the metaphor of a tree. He nurtures it, he suns it with smiles, he covers his anger against the enemy with smiles. So a lot of cunning employed. He cries over it, he smiles over it, and thus it grows into a tree to blossom, to give some fruit. And that apple, which is the fruit of the anger of this person against his enemy, which he has not controlled, or which he has not expressed, gives a fruit which is a poisonous one, which tempts the enemy to come into his compound, come into his garden, eat the fruit, and obviously the enemy dies. So it's a metaphor, the tree and the fruit and all of that. But what is being conveyed is that the anger against the enemy that was not conveyed or not expressed ends up destroying the enemy, ends up killing the enemy. Now, this is what we refer to as, metaphorically expressing something. So the theme basically is that when I express my anger, it is not so destructive. I get rid of it. But anger that is not expressed ends up giving a very destructive outcome. So that was very easy. You could actually understand it. And that inference question was a moderate one. Title, I'm marking titles of poems difficult because they come very close in terms of options. Particularly, the question was, which is the most unsuitable title? Now to arrive at that, that means you have to accept the 4 other options. That was a little challenging. Otherwise, if you understand the theme of the poem, it's not very difficult. Okay, and you could actually finish this in a matter of 6 minutes or so, 6 or 7 minutes, easily done. Okay. Now, this was your challenging one, RC4, which is art, which is philosophy, not art, all right, which is philosophy. And it had to do with 20th century philosophical thought, that is employed to describe the world. So what have been the philosophical systems? A very, very heavy read, and is also slightly lengthy, 560 words. You need a lot of time to read the various lines, understand the paragraphs. Questions are also not easy. 2 of them are anyway difficult. Difficult not because these questions by nature difficult, a type of question is not difficult, but it's difficult for you to locate the detail. You can't find the detail so easily. So not something recommended, because this would take you about 10-12 minutes, surely at 12 minutes to read and get to the options. So definitely to be avoided. Okay, next. Now the 5th RC, again an easy one, not a lengthy one too, 200 odd words, cartography, the word is used, and that idea can also be pulled out. The main idea, you're talking of Native American map making, which is largely done from the perspective of the non-Native Americans, right? So easy to relate. Yes, the primary purpose question was difficult because the options are closed. When you're asked, the purpose of the author is to analyze, to describe, to argue. It's always very confusing identifying that. So that was slightly challenging, but the other two questions were moderate and wouldn't take you more than an 8-9 minutes here. So roughly at about 9 minutes, there were so many. This passage, RC5 could be done, RC3 could be, the poem could be taken, RC1 and 2 could be taken. So roughly, let's say we spend about a 30 or 35 minutes, you could actually end up taking 3 full RCs and that poem, right? Except that philosophy passage. Two parajumbles. One of the parajumbles was a challenging one. The 25th one was quite challenging, but the 20th one, which had 6 sentences, in fact, can even be called easy because the first and the sixth sentence give you great clarity and the middle 4 sentences are not very confusing. So definitely easy to moderate here. Okay. Next, critical reasoning. Now, since you had 7 questions, it was a lot of ground to cover, correct? So weaken, by now you are accustomed to it, and I always maintain कि अगर आपने weaken का structure पता किया, you understand how weakening questions are to be approached. There is nothing difficult about weakening questions, right? So question 11 as well as question 18, both of which are weakening questions, were moderate. Now, the flaw in the reasoning is difficult because identifying the flaw, which normally is connected in the contained in the assumption of the argument, now that's a little challenging. Okay, particularly this one was a little difficult. Coming down to that option, identifying this is the flaw was a little difficult. So not recommended highly. Assumptions, assumptions, either we are good at assumptions or we are bad at assumptions. It doesn't come very naturally to everyone. Some of us, it comes naturally to some of us. Some of us are very easily, some of us are in a position to identify assumptions if we think in the right way. But if we are not approaching a question and the premises and the conclusion of a question in the right way, then an assumption can be difficult. Okay. So of question 16 and 17, one was moderate and the other was difficult. People who are comfortable with this question type should have gotten into this because you could take both of them. Okay, weaken bhi le sakte the. Logical continuation is actually moderate, but yes, a lot of us have a lot of problem with eliminating the options of logical continuation. We are unable to figure out how to eliminate. So for that reason, I would say that maybe you should have avoided this, right? And then the fact inference judgment question is not difficult, especially since you've been given a complete lecture on this. You've solved about quite a number of questions and exercises on this. Wasn't difficult at all, could be done. You are able to identify one fact easily, and then you can also see that one is a judgment. And then you can do some smart solving and arrive at the option. So could be done. I would only say that yahan pe logical continuation, maybe some of you would have avoided. Flaw in the reasoning, some of you would have avoided. People who find assumption questions difficult would have avoided. Otherwise, you would have taken question 11, question 16, 17, 18, and definitely 21 too. Okay. So there is a lot of room for you to solve questions here. And per critical reasoning question, I end up spending about 2 minutes, not more than 2 minutes. At worst, if you're stuck with that, maybe 2.5 minutes. But otherwise, if I spend about 8 minutes or so, I could very easily take 4 or 5 questions here. Okay, next. Now with the vocabulary, that is the text completion, sentence completion questions and grammar. The one of the sentence completion was difficult, particularly the early one. Question 5 was difficult because, you require to really get into that sentence, identify the language there, quite challenging. Whereas the 26th one was, that one which talked of a description of, that particular book that we are referring to, very easy. Everything, everything came down to that last blank. The last blank needed to have a negative word, and the only negative word in the 5 options is that word disenchanting. Everything else is positive there, correct? So very easily I can locate or arrive at the correct option. Grammar also was moderate because largely the concept tested were either a subject verb agreement or the other one that was tested was to do with tense. So fairly doable. Okay, nothing like, those unusual topics or unusual concepts being tested. Very easy. Okay. So before we, go on to look at the number of moderate and easy questions here, let's also understand decision making. Again, decision making, we've stuck to last year's pattern, which is also the pattern indicated as per the mock test upload that you find on the XAT official website. 21 questions, and we always recommend a time of about 45 minutes. Some of you might be quicker and might be able to get through decision making in about 40 minutes or even a 35 minutes. I still believe that a 35 minutes is not doing justice to these caselets, because remember, the caselets need to be read carefully, the details need to be evaluated carefully. So what were the caselets? 9 of them business, situational, and ethics caselets. There were 5 caselets with 3 questions each, making for 15, and 2 caselets with 2 questions each, making for another 4 questions, and 2 caselets with 1 question each, making for a total of 2 questions. So 15, 4, and 2, we are looking at 21 questions totally. What is the level of difficulty? I want to term this as not just a moderate one, but a moderate to difficult one. Okay, for a change, somehow there was, quite a few questions had trickiness of options, and you might have seen this reflected in your inaccuracy. I am tempted to believe that your accuracy levels might have been compromised in this section. All right. Let's look at the various caselets. So caselet 1, ethical plus situational decision making, the one that had to do with Recon Africa's petroleum exploration company, Recon Africa Petroleum Exploration Company. So I'm calling this ethical because there was also this environmental aspect connected with it, right? So the situation, slightly lengthy, you had to spend 2 minutes or so reading that situation, 2 or 2.5 minutes. The first question was an easy one because, when you're talking of an environmental stand, anything that is pro environmental will be done. So the first question was easy, but question 2 and 3 are tricky because you get stuck with those two options both in question 2 and 3. And that is why, this might have been a difficult one for you. You might have got these two questions inaccurate because there are high chances that you get stuck with those two options. Likewise, caselet 2, the SurePay and the XiPay payment platforms, nice to read. And always when we talk of a Chinese platform versus a US platform, highly competitive. So you can understand it because it's so much to do with whatever we relate to these days and in terms of, payment platforms. But the questions, 2 of them difficult and 1 was easy. That third one was the easy one. It looked like there was no other option conflicting, very straightforward. But question 4 and 5 were difficult because yahan be again, you'd get stuck with 2 options. Choosing between those 2 options is always difficult. So not a great start, caselet 1 and caselet 2. You might have taken them, as I said, but I'm sure you will have been stuck with inaccuracy there. Caselet 3 was an easy one, since it was just one paragraph. And it was also, if you've actually done that handout, those sample questions, solving questions that we gave you, it was so much in line with that. But we're not talking of a peer helping out or, commenting on another peer's work here. We're talking of a superior taking a decision about, his reportees or his team members' work, right? So very easy, you could figure it out, easy to moderate tha question, definitely to be done. You could actually finish it in a matter of 2 minutes. Caselet 4, the situational decision making, which involved Jim and the bank robbery incident, is not very straightforward because you had to think a little before you mark the correct answer. There was that one option that would confuse you slightly, but overall, you relate to it, you understand whatever is happening. Okay, and you can see that the bank, by in firing Jim, had taken a very strong action. So the moment you figure out that the bank shouldn't have taken this option, you are able to figure out the sequence of options that you should mark. Okay, next, caselet 5, business decision making about future furniture and environmental consciousness, etc. Fairly doable. Okay, you can relate to that. It's a little lengthy reading, slightly more details. Every question also has that additional data given. So time wise, you're going to invest a little more time here. but the questions were doable. 11th question was a little difficult, but overall, you could still manage this. This was a caselet definitely that would fetch you a good reward. Caselet 6, that to do with amaze and rekindle, definitely to be done, because it seems to be a very clear out and out kind of decision there. The 12th question was a very easy one. The concept itself, the topic itself is the situation itself is very, very evident. Amaze ends up erasing two of these books. Now, what is the stand they will take vis-a-vis the consumers or the people who subscribe to it? So the stand is very clear. So both questions very, very doable and easy, should have taken this. Okay. Then caselet 7, situational decision making, that question of Savio and the purchase order of two forges that he does. The first two paragraphs to be read. The first question there was a little difficult because, what is the action that the company takes against Savio, in terms of revising the order or returning the order, how exactly they are going to return the order, refuse the order or cancel the order is not very clear. So a little tricky there. You get stuck with the two or three options here. The next question was a very easy one, very straightforward one. Okay. Caselet 8. But yes, I would still want to believe you should have taken Caselet 7. Caselet 8, the business decision making regarding Burger Queen, Satisfries, and Better Burger. I thought that first question there was difficult, taking a call on Satisfries and what is the course ahead for them, correct? But the other two questions were very easy, 17 and 18. This caselet had a little more of reading. The paragraphs were slightly lengthy and there was also additional data, but still overall relatable one, right? Next, the 10th caselet, that of business decision making of the Nakamura Lacquer Company, NLC. The last two questions were very straightforward, could easily be done, not much of trickiness there. But that question 19, where they decide as to, which order is to be taken, that is a slightly conflicting one. There's that one option that you get stuck with, and therefore it's marked slightly difficult. So overall, other than those first two caselets, which are rather difficult, okay, because they have at least two questions that are difficult, other than these, you would have seen better accuracy in most other caselets, okay? So let's look at what the overall verbal sectional looks like. So the verbal sectional had one easy question, 14 moderate questions. We've identified 14 questions as moderate and 11 difficult questions. So expectation is, I'm able to identify a large number of moderate questions, maybe about 12 or 13. A few questions of the difficult segment also I end up solving. Surely that easy question I end up identifying. So roughly the expectation is that I look at a 13 plus maybe a 2, which is about 15, 16 questions here. Let's look at decision making. So there were 3 easy questions that we identified, 10 moderate questions, and 8 difficult questions, moderate to difficult. Okay. So the expectation here, about 8 plus 3 here, the easy questions, that makes for 11, another 2 or 3. So roughly around of 14 to 15 questions is what we are looking at. So 16 questions is what we are looking at for a 98 percentile. I target about a 16, 17 questions at an 80% accuracy. I end up getting a score of about 13. So a score of 13 is where we map the 98 percentile for this sectional. 13, a score of 13, which is slightly on the higher side in comparison with the previous mocks. A score of 14.50, which is again slightly on the higher side for a 99 percentile. 14.50 for a 99 percentile, 18 for a 100 percentile, 18 plus. 11.25 for a 95 percentile, a score of 10 fetches you a 90 percentile, a score of 8.50 fetches you an 80 percentile, a score of 7.7575 fetches you a 75 percentile. You'll find that these scores are slightly on the higher side in comparison to the previous verbal sectionals of XAT. Okay. Next, For decision making, we identified something on the lines of a 14, 15 questions at the at accuracy of about 80%. We're looking at a target of about 12.25, which is what we've mapped as a 98 percentile. A 12.25 is 98 percentile. That means a 13.75 fetches you a 99 percentile. A 16 questions, a score of 16 plus fetches you a 100 percentile. 10.75 fetches you 95 percentile, 9.50 fetches you 90 percentile, 8.25 fetches you 80 percentile, and 8.25 and 7.25 fetches you a 75 percentile. In comparison with your previous DM sectional, this one is slightly better. You will find that in the scores, more doable questions. I said the last decision making sectional was a challenging one. There were a lot of tricky questions there. So this is what the expected scores and percentiles of these two sectionals are. What is the overall picture? So a 75 percentile you can achieve with a total score of 18.25, with 7.75 in VARC, 5.75 in QA, and 7.75 in DM. A total of 20.75 fetches you an overall 80 percentile with a 8.50 in VARC, a 7 in QA, an 8.25 in decision making. An overall of 25.50 fetches you a 90 percentile with a 10 in VARC, a 10.30 in QA. Yes, 30. Remember there is that negative marking for every unattempted question beyond 8 questions. So 0.10 negative marking, and that will mean that you can even look at scores as 10.30, 10.50, 9.50 in decision making, and overall of 25.50. An overall of 30.50 fetches you a 95 percentile with 11.25 in VARC, 12 in QA, 10.75 in DM. An overall of 35.25 fetches you a 98 percentile with a 13 in VARC, 13.75 in QA, a 12.25 in DM. An overall of 35.25 fetches you a 98 percentile, which is 13 in VARC, 13.75 in QA, and 12.25 in DM. An overall of 37.5 fetches you a 99 percentile, which is 14.50 in VARC, 15 in QA, and 13.75 in DM. An overall of 40.5 fetches you a 99.5 percentile, which is 18 in VARC, 17.50 in QA, and 16 in DM. So this is what the overall scores and percentiles of XAT3 are. I hope many of you have been able to reach your target percentiles, because depending on what colleges you're targeting, this is what should be your cutoff targets. So XLRI BM, look at the expected cutoffs. The overall will have to be 96 plus percentile. XLRI HRM, we've seen the calls being given at as low an overall percentile as 94, and a 90 percentile above is a fitment for you for a host of colleges, starting with XIMB, IMT Ghaziabad, etc., right? And onwards, a lot of other colleges. So that is the overall percentile that you'll want to target depending on which cloud and what college you are targeting. Also pay heed to the individual, sectional cutoffs. Remember that your sectional cutoff of verbal for XLRI HRM has to be higher. It is an 85 percentile that is expected, whereas VALR for BM could be just an 80 percentile and above, right? VALR for other colleges is just 70, and so is the expectation for other sectionals too. All of your other Cloud 2 colleges will expect a sectional cutoff of 70 percentile, whereas XLRI will demand a sectional cutoff of 80 and 90 in quant for BM. Please keep this in mind. 85 in verbal for HRM, whereas 70 and 75 in DM and quant will do. All right. So these are your targets. Ensure, especially since we are looking at an exam which doesn't have a sectional timer, no sectional timing, which means that there are temptations for you to just stick to your strength areas and stick to just those sectionals. So ensuring that you're able to achieve the expected sectional percentiles and developing a strategy accordingly is important, which is why we always encourage you to think 50, 45, 50, which is 50 minutes for VALR, 50 minutes for QA, and a 45 minutes for decision making. Stick to this time breakup meticulously. All right. So thank you so much, all of you, and good night. Take care. Keep solving more and more of XAT questions, past questions. Remember, the best way to master XAT is to solve past XAT papers and past XAT questions. So the take-home mocks as well as the EOMs are highly relevant. Please do ensure you don't miss any of them. Thank you.